What I think is important is for us to be alone sometimes. It's alone with our own thoughts, where we're creating our own thoughts. We're driving the direction of our thoughts. There's some great books, one that I read a long time ago called The Spirit of the Disciplines, and it's more of a spiritual book, but it's about the disciplines, and one of the disciplines is silence and solitude. It's very important. You know, I have a good friend of mine, Mark Sanborn. Many of you probably know him, the author of The Fred Factor, and You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader. One of the things that's always impressed me about Mark is that every single day he takes at least 15 minutes to a half an hour with just himself and a yellow pad and a pen. And he just thinks. He allows himself to think and be creative. So whether you're doing your silence and your solitude for physical and emotional rest, or you're doing it for spiritual reasons, or you're doing it just to be creative for your work, it's really important to spend some alone time. So that's my challenge to you today. Make sure that you're spending some alone time. It doesn't have to be out in the middle of the woods. It doesn't have to be that way, although I know a lot of you love to do that. But even if it just means getting up 15 minutes earlier than your spouse and the kids, or staying up 15 minutes later after everybody else goes to bed, but taking that time to be alone and quiet and at peace with your own thoughts and your own spirit. Very, very important for successful living. One of the things that really always amazes me is things like these train trestles, or even the freeway leaving Seattle and going I-90, I think goes all the way to Chicago. But I mean, to me it always reminds me of the power of the human spirit. It reminds me of the power of an idea backed by execution. I mean, think about this. We're in the middle of, that mountain, who knows how many thousands of feet that mountain is over there. 4, 5, 6,000 feet, maybe even more, I don't know. But at one point, there was nothing here. There was people in Seattle, there were people in Chicago, right? And somebody said, how can we get a train of people from Seattle to Chicago? And over the course of all these years, and just manpower and brute force of blowing up all the rocks with dynamite, and then they create this thing, right? Which you take a train across. Of course, now it's shut down, it's walking paths and biking paths. But the ability then, this drop-off is a couple hundred feet, and they're taking trains across it. So many things that we take for granted during the average day, that somebody had to execute in order for us just to experience it. Pretty amazing. The interstate highway system, old train, trestles and things like this. Really, really amazing what we get to experience, that we don't realize just the magnitude of the idea and the execution of that idea. Really pretty cool.
Yeah, you ever make it to the top of any of those peaks?
I haven't. I made it to the top of Mount Si.
Once?
Twice. I think I did it twice, yeah. 2 times was enough for me. All right, I'm going to get a little deep on you here, so stick with me. Every time I'm out in the woods, I always pick a random tree, like this one. There's thousands of trees all around it. And people are walking this path all the time. 99% of the people, they never even think about this tree or look at this tree. They're looking at the path. And trees like this always remind me of something, really a good lesson for life, if you think about it. This tree is out here just one of millions and millions of trees, and it could seem unimportant, right? And yet this tree has a part in the ecosystem. It's doing its job, putting out oxygen, all the things that trees and foliage do, and it's doing its thing. Now, is the world going to end if this tree goes down, if somebody were to cut it down? No. But the fact is that when we die, the world keeps right on spinning, but it doesn't mean that it's not important to the overall grand scheme of things. So on one hand, you could kind of say, well, we're not really that important, we're just one cog in the wheel or something like that. But the reality is that it is important, it plays an important role. So no matter what you're thinking about your life, the fact is that you fit in, that you have a job here to do. You have a role in the society around you. Now, here's the really good news. I spent the last 7 years of Jim Rohn's life working with him. A lot of you know Jim. Spelled R-O-H-N for those of you that don't know. He's kind of known as one of the best speakers of all time. He gave Tony Robbins his first job. He worked with me the last 7 years of his life. We co-wrote a book together. Jim had a really funny quote. He said, if you don't like the way things are, you're not a tree. Change it. You're not a tree. I mean, this tree's stuck here for its entire life, right? And it's gonna do its job and it's gonna play a role, but eventually it's gonna die. Us, we're not trees. We can do whatever we want. We wanna create a greater life, perfect. You wanna live a simple life, perfect. It doesn't matter, but you're in control of your destiny.